So it's in all of your interest to begin. Dolores has 7 hours worth of material.
It's true.
No one leaves till it's done.
Bonnie says I can just keep going, so.
Don't encourage her. All right, I'll go ahead and pray for us, and then we will begin our conversation. God, we thank you that you bless us with so many things, for the wonderful children running around and the food that we've had this evening. I pray, God, for our conversation, that you would guide it by your Spirit for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Awesome. I really do feel like we could do 3 more weeks of this class, so I will try to hit the hot spots. The handout today has a lot of quotations on it. I probably won't read all of them, but they are a good sign of where I think you might find good further reading, right? So L.M. Sakasis is, again, the director of the Christian Studies Center at the University of Florida. The stuff that he writes on Substack is great. And then there's a book we're going to be talking about a fair amount today by Matthew Crawford called The World Beyond Your Head on Becoming an Individual in the Age of Distraction. It's really good. I have not yet read all of it, but what I have read is really good. So I want to start out. Oh, you're going to go.
I was just going to say Dolores is online friends with Matthew Crawford. We're both sort of like fan people, boys, girls, whatever. He's a contemporary living philosopher who's really just amazing. Matthew Crawford is.
One quick exchange with him last week where he liked something that I wrote and called it helpful. So I screenshotted it, texted Michael, and told him that I had to retire now. But he did not even follow me on Substack, so sadly we're not the besties I had hoped we would be. But it was still exciting. Okay, I want to start by, do I read this or ask it first? Yeah, I'm going to start by reading, I won't read the whole thing, but some of the first quotation, and then I have a question for Michael, because a criticism that philosophers get, and that is, I will say, probably the most reasonable way to criticize a philosopher, is just to say, you guys get to sit and think about all the possibilities, and you're very rarely called upon to act and make high-stakes decisions. And so you can just sit there and think through everything without the pressure of well, right, but this actually has to get done. So some of what I want to talk about today is, for all the things that we've brought up these last few weeks, what should a person do? But also, what can a person do, especially just as an individual? How much control does an individual have? I think a fair amount, but I want to read, this is from an article, that's maybe a year or two old, by Mike Sakasis, called Manufactured Inevitability and the Need for Courage. I could just take that title and say that's what I want for all of us, right? To see that not everything is as inevitable as it might seem, and also we should live deliberately and intentionally. So he writes, he's talking about people who will tell you that the tech is just, the cows are out of the barn, right? You can't put the cats back in the bag. These self-appointed evangelists of technological assimilation would have us abandon any critique of technology and simply adapt to the demands of the technological society. I then proceeded to outline a series of symptoms by which we might diagnose someone with what he calls a Borg complex. So a person with a Borg complex makes grandiose but unsupported claims for technology, uses the term Luddite ahistorically and as a casual slur, pays lip service to but ultimately dismisses genuine concerns, equates resistance or caution to reactionary nostalgia. I will tell you, I see all of this. This is absolutely, if you try to push back on the AI, the hope of this AI future, I've seen all of these things. Starkly and matter-of-factly frames the case for assimilation, announces the bleak future for those who refuse to assimilate, expresses a contemptuous disregard for past cultural achievements, and refers to historical antecedents solely to dismiss present concerns. So he's hopeful, right? He thinks that things are not so inevitable, and that, in fact, a lot of this is overblown. I have reason to believe Michael might not agree. What do you think?
Yeah, after last week announcing that I was going to become the optimist, I have to be the pessimist here. I think when thinking about inevitability, you have to break it down into different areas or domains of life. What I would say is I think technological inevitability is a real thing. There are certain cases where technological advancement is inevitable, and let me describe the features of those situations. Whenever you have lots of people engaged in economic or military competition, and a technology brings a genuine and substantial advantage, I think, one, it's very hard to keep all those parties from developing it further. An example of that, if you think about the inevitability thesis, and again, there are areas where I think this is right, but there was if anyone can remind me of who all signed it, that would be great. But about 2 years ago, a bunch of AI industry insiders signed this thing saying, we need to take like an 18-month pause on this. And I think pretty much most of the big names of the big companies were on that list of people signing it, saying the risks are of non-alignment, misalignment are too great. We need to slow down and take a pause. Okay? And the question is, could you imagine a world where we just said, okay, we're not going to go down this path of continuing to develop AI, or take another area that's near and dear to my heart because it's so horrific. Questions of the ways you can use the capacities we have for genetic engineering, either of viruses or of human beings. And the question is, what would it take to prevent those things from advancing? You would somehow have to have a world authority. And if you know Eliezer Yudkowsky, I think is the biggest of the sort of doomers about AI. He wrote a book called If Anyone Builds It, We All Die, I believe is the name of the title. He's got a great name too, Eliezer Yudkowsky.
Yeah, I feel like that's the name of somebody you should listen to, I think.
Anyway, but he's taken very seriously in a lot of these circles, some circles at least. He's been thinking about these problems for 15 years, and he's of the view that, we haven't even been talking about these big existential risks, like what if it, turns against us in some form or fashion. We've just been talking about the mundane risks, of what if we lose literacy, what if we are distracted, these kind of things, right? Anyway, so he says he's one of these people that's you need to stop this, because he believes very firmly if it develops, it's the end of humanity, more or less, or at least civilization in its current form. And so then you're like, well, what would it take to stop it? Because this guy is committed to stopping it, so what would it take to stop it? And his claim was, we need a consensus of nations who are on board and are willing to use nukes to make everybody else stop it. Okay? That's how serious he considers the problem. Now, his calculation may be totally wrong, may not be. I think anyone in this room who's honest says,
we just don't know.
We don't, right? I mean, there's a lot of understanding of how these things work that none of us have, probably. I certainly don't have. He may be crazy, he may be extreme. But anyway, so you take his analysis, he's like, the only way to stop this is the United States and, I don't know, the European Union. We get together and we're like, nukes behind, no more research in this stuff, right? And if you did that, maybe you could stop it. But the question with technological inevitability is when a technology genuinely confers significant economic advantage, such that you go out of business if you don't adopt, or that you become dominated by another society and there are multiple players in the game, there's just no mechanism, because what everyone thinks is if you talk to people in Silicon Valley, should we pause AI research? Often what they'll answer is they'll say, well, we could do that, but China will keep doing it anyway. So let's get there first so we can imprint our values on the technology, right? Or the same thing with massive surveillance, big data processing, all these kinds of things. So I actually do think inevitability is a really serious problem. Where I think it's not is something like education. So I think that basically there's areas where the technology doesn't really add much value. And this kind of language of inevitability is basically just a way to sell products to,
oh, for sure.
naive administration.
Yeah, the quotes page was getting way too long, the handout. But there was one from the Crawford, no, it's from the Circasis thing. Oh man, I should have just written it down, and then I could really tell you her name. But anybody who says they can tell you the future is really trying to own it, is the claim, right? And it's a lot of what's happening in education, I think, really is this inevitability messaging packaged with the right tech system. Since your students are all using it anyway, we have the product that will help them to use it well. That kind of inevitability language, I think, really is just salesmanship. And universities have just fallen for it, hook, line, and sinker. It's been really shocking to see. And we're already getting pushback, but yeah.
Yeah, and I assume in lots of business applications, or I'm guessing, it seems plausible it'll turn out not to be nearly as useful as people think, right? I think there's a lot of salesmanship going on, and in this inevitability language, you need this, integrate this in all areas of your business. I I was just listening, I was reading the comment section online, someone discussing this, and there's a woman saying she had to use AI in work because by the time she woke up in the morning, she had like 100 emails from all over the globe that had come in overnight, and she didn't have time to read them and get her daughter ready for school, so AI will read them, process them, start to formulate responses, and she just goes in, it's like yes, yes, no, right? Yeah. Anyway, I mean, there's a thing that you could do, and I wonder if in the end that's going to make communication between human beings worse, not better, right? The amount of possibilities for things to slip through the cracks, no one gets the email, you're sending things that aren't connecting with, like, right. So I can see you do that, you think you're saving time, and you make things worse.
No, I think I think about that with the little face scanning phone and dual factor authentication. All of these things are supposed to make them faster, and in my life, they make them slower all the time, right? Now I have to have a second device. Now I need to get the camera at the right angle. Now I need to, there was an article just today, or maybe even two, kids are starting to push back, and so their parents are getting loud at some AI math software that was pitched to a lot of schools. But it is driving children crazy because it's supposed to be individualized AI math instruction. But at every level, there's this cool animation that play, like, so you can't hurry, right? Like, you have to watch a little video, and then you answer the question, and then you have to wait for the celebration animation to go through before, and they're losing it. So I do think there will be some, but I want to step back because I think we actually agree in that respect, because that's what, anytime you talk about slowing down AI research, it's, well, but China, like, that's what you hear. If we don't do it, they'll do it first. But I think it's a second question, or at least there is a second question about what that has to look like for individuals. Or what, like, so if there's this economic inevitability of how the technology is going to develop, does that mean, resistance is futile? And so just don't fight it at all in any areas.
Oh, for sure not.
Yeah.
No.
Right? But the question is, all right, I want to read a quote. I just read a book that is a novel that is fine. It's not great. It was recommended to me. And honestly, the person that recommended it to me recommended it just because it was what it was about. She didn't say this is an amazing novel. It's called Culpability, and it's about when, it's not a spoiler, it's like the basic plot. A self-driving car is involved in a fatal accident. And the book is called Culpability because it's all about trying to figure out who is morally on the hook for this. And this is a quote from a character in the book who designed the system for the self-driving car. And of course, as authors would have it, her son was technically sitting in the driver's seat when the crash happened, right? So this is like all these lines of who's responsible. But here's the line. There is a place for algorithms, a bigger and a bigger place. But people have to be better too. They have to not drink and drive. They have to not text behind the wheel. We shouldn't make these machines because we want them to be good for us or good instead of us. We should make them because they can help us be better ourselves. And I was thinking about the very first week when you said, like, what we want to reject is this idea that the technology is just neutral. It's just a neutral tool, and you can use it for good and use it for harm. Because I feel like that's kind of coming through here. We want great algorithms, and then there's this picture, I guess, that I think is fairly common, where on the one hand you have people, and people really have to work on being good people, right? And on the other hand you have technology, and that's neutral. So when bad people use it, bad things happen. But if good people just use the technology well, good things happen. And I really do think it's very naive. I think there's actually this constant feedback loop between ourselves and the tools that we're using. I don't know, do you want to jump in here?
No, I would say, I mean, if you think about what we can do as individuals, I mean, I am more optimistic about the kind of things we talked about mostly in this class, right? This class has been about how technology shapes our attention and how that relates to worship. It hasn't been about the future of warfare or the future of surveillance, right? Which I think when you think about AI technology, those are in some ways the bigger, more alarming questions to me, but they're less, we have less of an ability to do something about them. So it is a question about, we've been focusing on these questions of how does it shape us? Mm-hmm. And here I want to go back to something you said and actually defend philosophers. Okay. I'm usually not a fan of like just talk and then talk some more, and what we need is more talking. right? We need to get another, but I do think in the case of how these things shape us, part of what we need is really careful reflection on ourselves. I mean, we change our habits slowly over time. If you think about like when you first got this, a smartphone, I can't exactly remember when I first got one, but you think back to when you first got one and what you started doing with it and what you were doing with it after a year and what you were doing with it after 4 years and the thought is this progress is slow and it's gradual and you often can lose track or sight of how it's changing you. And so I think the reflective ability to think about yourself at the end of each day, what are the things that I'm looking for, what are the things that I'm noticing, and that's also where I think conversation with other people, continued conversation is actually really important.
That's right, I agree.
Because we're able then to say like, hey, what have you noticed? What do you look for in yourself and the way you use these things? What has been effective in, fencing off the uses that are less helpful?
But then there's also so there are our choices, the choices that we make for how we're going to interact with these things. But then there's all the stuff that's foisted on us. So I'll skip that quotation. I actually found this really helpful. I think I'm going to jump ahead. If you turn the page, the quotation on the back of the middle page, Matthew Crawford's writing about this thing he had for his toddler, a leapfrog table, I guess. We had some leapfrog toys. We didn't have the table. But it's just the classic kind of big toddler toy where you hit it and buttons and lights, all this crazy stuff happens.
Can I stop it? If you remember the very first week when we had photos, I actually put a photo of one of those up, a very similar device up there.
Yeah.
Right? It's a little bouncer thing with all the buttons and...
Yeah, I don't even think it's a bouncer, it's a table. So like the kid just stands
Walks
there
around the
and
table.
pushes. Yeah. So you push buttons and there's lights and all that stuff. And he was talking about how if they ever turned this off, you can imagine you have a sort of philosopher father and a loud noisy toy in the house. I imagine he sometimes turned it off, right? And she would just rage. Apparently, if you turned it off so that there were no more responses, she just lost her little mind. And so he was thinking about that, and he writes, by hitting buttons, the toddler can reliably make something happen. Imagine the frustration of dealing with the world through the clumsy interface of your own body as a toddler who has not yet learned to walk, not learned to hold a crayon or work a pair of scissors. An attempt to roll a ball towards your father on the ground is as likely to send it flying up towards your own nose instead. And I loved this image because it's like, it's just a kid who wants to play with their noisy toy, right? But there is a sense in which toddlers do get frustrated because their bodies don't, it's like when babies first start using their hands and then they smack themselves in the face sometimes, right? They literally have to learn how to reliably control their body. But a toy like that gives them such exciting things without any of that hardship, it's consistent, it's reliable, it's way more predictable than their own body. And I think the more tools like this we have, the more they start to shape us even beyond just our personal deliberate habits. Yeah.
For sure, no, and I think one of the things that's interesting to think about, so the idea we talked about a couple times is that the technology is not a neutral instrument, but it shapes you. So I want to give one example of that with books, and then I want to move to talking with an AI chatbot and see if we can see similar kinds of patterns. So I want you to imagine that the only way for you to present your ideas was to talk face to face to another person. And let's imagine this is now about politics or about religion, right? Think of the last conversation you had on these questions where you were sitting across from a particular person and the degree to which emotions start to come into the question and the way that you don't, control where things go. Conversations move in a very organic, messy way, okay? Now you sit down to write a book, and this is just thinking about how did books shape our mentality, our culture. If you're interested in, there's a number of good books on that, but Marshall McLuhan's stuff is one of the theorists who's thought a lot about this, the way books shape us. So you get to a book, and now suddenly you can set aside all of the emotional content, all the emotional dimension of the conversation. It's not there, it's just a piece of paper, right? And it's a piece of paper with which you can address everyone an imagined someone, it's very different from addressing a particular person or even a particular room. And I'm not saying in a bad way, like I think books are great, but in using a book to communicate, in writing a book rather than having a conversation, you're engaging in a process that shapes how you're going to do it. I mean, to go to the other example that they all give is when you write a book, you spend, and this is near and dear to my heart because I spend way too much time with this, you spend months or years organizing your ideas in a linear form, where you say everything about this, and then you move to this, and you say everything about that. Conversations never work that way. No human conversation does, right? We're trying this conversational format, partly just, what is the difference between a conversation versus a lecture? It's a little messier, we kind of miss stuff, we drop stuff, we don't know where it's going, right? And so the idea would be like when you have a book culture as opposed to a conversational oral culture, it makes people think in very linear terms, in less emotionally reactive terms. And in a lot of ways, those are probably good things, but they're different. Now, take the case of talking a lot with an AI chatbot, which I do. I know people that I really respect. I couldn't respect more. Just to be clear, it's my brother. One of my brothers. I couldn't respect this guy more in so many ways. He's, morally, intellectually, but he spends a lot of time having life conversations with AI, as maybe some people in this room do. And you might think, well, what's going on there? And maybe it's fine. What I would suggest to anyone who does that is reflect very carefully on how the patterns of conversation develop. And here's one thing you would notice: you don't have any emotional, personal responsibility to the interlocutor.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? If I talk to any one of you, what I say sticks to me. I can't say something and be like, oh, just kidding, I didn't mean it. I mean, I can say it in a lighthearted way, but if I'm talking to you, that sticks to me. I'm going to consider that first. And if I talk to you, I have to consider what you might do with that information, how you're going to see me differently. There's all these dimensions to the conversation that now when I'm talking to a disembodied set of words on a screen, and again, how that affects you, I mean, there may be good things. You can, so I'm not even saying it's a matter of like, well, one is bad and one is good. But you need to think very, very carefully about how this new kind of pattern of conversation shapes who you mold yourself to be in this context.
And I think part of that is a degree of self-awareness that is going to be difficult. So your brother, who I also really love and admire, has a pretty good, rich social network of people that he talks to and really talks to. But some of the people that I've encountered that talk to AIs a lot do so because they're lonely and because they've not had much success with human relationships. And there I worry it's even more likely to be counterproductive because human relationships ask something of you and an AI asks nothing of you. And so if you're having trouble developing human relationships, turning to an algorithm might just encourage the kind of things that don't need encouraging, right? Like, hey, make sure you're listening and not just talking. Hey, it's 3 a.m, right? Like a person is going to say, you don't text me at 12 unless something's going on, right? It's 1 a.m. None of that. You don't get any of that sort of uncomfortable feedback from an LLM. Actually, it has started doing that this week and people are mad. I just found this today, but a number of people complaining that their AI chatbot is telling them to go to bed because it's 3 a.m. And they're like, I pay for this service. I can use it whenever I want, right? Absolutely indignant. And of course they get mad and it apologizes. But ordinarily, I think they're trying to, who knows what they're even trying to do, but yes.
Yeah, and I think the thing would be like, it's not like 1 hour of anything is gonna totally shape your personality and your self-image and your speech patterns and your thought patterns, but hundreds and hundreds of hours over decades absolutely shapes how you think, how you feel, in ways that are, really easy to lose track of.
Or even just over the course of a few weeks, the habit, what do you turn to? Who do you turn to for this question? I'm actually going to read a little bit. There is a poem. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's way too long. It's a poem that somebody, again, just put on Substack recently. His name is Sean Smucker. And it's called Please Use AI. I'm just going to read some of it. Please be sure to use AI when making your next, meal plan, for example. Definitely do not call your friend who loves to cook and ask her for her favorite recipes or tips or ways to save time making meals. Because you will end up talking for longer than you had hoped. Hearing perhaps about her father's cancer diagnosis, or how lonely she's been, or even what she planted in her spring garden and then lost with the early frost. And be sure to use AI when planning that next camping trip, the last one you will take with this particular child. That's going to make me cry. Never mind. All right, I'll keep it.
You want me to keep reading?
Last one. Definitely do not text your friend who has fly fished every river in Pennsylvania and biked every backwoods trail, because you might end up texting back and forth for the rest of the day, or even meeting up late for a beer and hearing how he has ended each recent night blackout drunk. Or perhaps you'll hear how his cousin is an idiot on Facebook. Or maybe just that he repaired his own washing machine and is pretty damn proud of that. It goes on and on. But those little habits, right? I could call my mom, or I could Google. It doesn't have to be AI, right? Am I going to Google a recipe, or am I going to ask my mom how she makes this? All of these tiny, tiny decisions. Every time we replace a human relationship thing with a technological one, it's just chipping away at things in ways that I think have probably been going on since the internet and are accelerating with AI chatbots.
Agreed?
Agreed. Okay.
Well said.
Well, thank you. I'm a little structurally all over the place today because I really did feel like there was so much to talk about and not enough time. But I want to turn back to the first page. Check the time. Oh, we're good. Just one more glimpse, because I think one of the hardest things here is figuring out what an individual can do. And I think part of figuring out what we can do as individuals is just coming to keep asking ourselves the right questions regularly. Like, it's so easy to get desensitized to stuff. And often it's good to get I wish I could get desensitized to the little TV screens at gas stations. Oh my gosh, they make me crazy. They make me ragey, right? I wish I could just become a person who just tunes it out and just doesn't notice that there's a little TV yelling advertisements at me when I just want my gas. But then there are other things where I think we should be careful not to get desensitized. So actually, Michael, why don't you read this? What will it take to get AI out of schools? This is just a quotation from a New Yorker article.
Just the paragraph on the front page?
Yep.
Okay. Then, in March, students at my 11-year-old daughter's public middle school began receiving new Google Chromebooks. And that is when I heard the tap-tap of the cloven hooves approaching our doorstep. The Chromebooks, which the students use in every class and for homework, came pre-installed with an all-ages version of Gemini, a suite of AI tools. When my daughter, who is in 6th grade, begins writing an essay, she gets a prompt: help me write. If she is starting work on a slideshow presentation, the prompt is, help me visualize. She shoos away these interruptions, but they persist. Help me edit. Beautify this slide. The image generator is there if she'd ever wish to pull the plug on her imagination. The Gemini chatbot is there if she ever wants to talk to no one.
And then a little bit later in the same article, this is an AI company developer sort of defending this. He offered an example. This is the second page, I'm about 3 lines down after the ellipses. Maybe a child, so this is the developer talking, maybe a child had a drawing that they were proud of, and the teacher can select one and put that into Google Vids, which is the company's AI video generation and editing app, and animate it into a really interesting video of that drawing, which immediately engages and hooks students in a very different way. He added that by using AI tools, students are able to create much more impressive projects that you could have never done before. And I guess just the last thing I want to say here is, like, so often with technology, the human worry is that we will use it badly or that it will go wrong. This article also includes those same kids with the school-issued Google Chromebooks watching pornography in the classroom, right? So there are those worries still and always. But the worries that, like, we've mostly been focusing on, I think it's worth pointing out, come from using the tool as it's designed. It's from using the thing exactly the way it's supposed to be used, in a way that really a lot of our cultural messaging tells us is a very good way to use it, right? And this idea, man, like your sixth grader could never have made such a cool video without that tool. Like, she didn't make the video, right? Like, she made the drawing. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think thinking about arguments to push back against the use of this stuff in education, Because I think the argument for it, I mean, one argument for it, particularly like at the college level where we are, is like, hey, these people are going out into a weird job market, not clear what it's going to be. You want them to have the tools that everyone's, and to know how to use the tools that everyone's trying to integrate, okay? So you actually, if you don't give them these tools at the university level and even integrate it, like I think the University of Ohio, right? A really prestigious school that you would think wouldn't mess with its brand this way, because some schools are going away from AI, like Yale, I think just signed something saying like, we're gonna do none of it. But Ohio State went the other way, and they're like, we're gonna basically require it to be integrated into all classes. You know, that the idea would be like, you're learning how to do chemistry and AI, not chemistry, right? And this is because that's the future, right? And I think the thing to say to that, you know, an argument that I feel fine with is like, maybe that's correct, and maybe it's dead wrong, and we as a society should place bets on both sides of that, right? And so if you can just say like, I'm not even, you know, for my argument, that like we should have schools that are fundamentally no AI, right? And I think to make that, you don't even have to say because I know this is the future or that's not the future. You just have to say any culture that's going to be stable needs to prepare for both eventualities and see what comes out. I mean, one of my deep fears, and I've talked with Jonathan Tucker a fair amount about this, who runs into a lot of these questions with you know, coding at work and the push to use AI all over the place. The suspicion that he and I share, he's obviously far more informed than I am and having this intuition, is that AI will get very good at doing the bottom 80% of the work, okay? The more routine work, it's the creative stuff where you really have to integrate and solve new problems that it won't ever manage to do, which maybe that's a strong claim. The never is always scary, right? But you could imagine a world where it gets very good, and it already is getting very good at these lower level tasks. Now, if that happens, what happens to our workforce? Well, no one ever gets to the top 20% because they haven't waded through the bottom 80% of tasks, right? The normal career trajectory of a lawyer or a programmer is like, hey, come to the office, we'll start you out with the dumb stuff, right? The stuff we could do in our sleep, but you can, you're gonna do it, okay? And then you get a little better, you're like, okay, well now you get to do a little more creative, you're not just doing the really routine stuff, and you slowly work up until you have a mind that can think about the entire code and how it all fits together, right? So the worry would be we could easily create a world where we don't have anyone to replace the top 20% that can't be replaced by, you know, and I think the same could be happening with writing. If you think that AI is good at mimicking what humans have already done, it's never going to write something fundamentally new, a new literary style, if you will, because all it's doing is copying really well any given style that's out there.
And now it's copying itself, so we should expect it to just get worse for a bit.
Probably, possibly. Anyway, the point would be like, there's a really good argument for saying like, some people ought to be betting on what are we going to do if this fails, right? Are we going to have people that know how to do the things that we now know how to do, or are we going to have lost those skills because we, you know, outsourced them? Yeah,
I think that's right. That's what I tend to say when I'm in conversations about, you know, how teachers should handle it. Like, all right, I suppose that it's probably good that there are some philosophy professors out there that are working hard on really carefully teaching their students how to use AI well for philosophy, right? And I would like to be on the other end of that spectrum, right? Really requiring them to do quite a lot without any technological help, because I think you're right. We really don't know what they will need in the future. And so I think the worst thing to do is this middle of the road approach where you don't work hard either way, where you're just being carried along, right? That's, I guess, the biggest take-home thing that I would love for people to get from this is like, we don't have to just be carried along, right? Whether what you want to do is think very carefully about how you use AI professionally, or think very carefully about maybe not using it. The point is like, we can be thinking about these things and asking ourselves questions. So there's a really powerful chapter in this book. What's it called? The Autistic Mind. It's Autism as a Design Principle. Gambling is the title. And when he's using the word autistic, it's from a very particular case study, right? So for babies for the first couple of months, literally like tiny newborns, they basically want to be attached to their mom, right? They haven't yet figured out that their mother's body is not just an extension of their own body, right? That's why you get that amazing, my favorite thing about newborns is their eternal hope and optimism. If they're hungry, they just swing their head and they're sure what they're looking for will be there, right? Like tiny newborns. But by about 3 months, babies tend to actually prefer a little bit of unpredictability, where the thing that they're going for or reaching for, they only get most of the time, not always, right? Except for children that end up being diagnosed with autism. And they continue to prefer the absolute predictability, right? No, every single time I do this, this is what happens. And they especially struggle with the unpredictability, socially speaking, of other people, right? If a person doesn't mirror them what they're expecting. This is the kind of thing that some people with autism struggle with, right? So he uses this word in that way. And I had a reason for, oh, okay. I really was going somewhere, I'm sorry. I'm just gonna put my reading glasses on. Because I have this. Okay, so in the middle of the second page, right after talking about the toddler at the table, he starts talking about, well, really, young men with video games. But it's at the end of talking about people in casinos. And in particular, not just casinos, overwhelmingly, casinos have gone just in terms of the sheer makeup. There used to be a lot more big tables, and now there's mostly machines. And slot machines have increasingly, like they went from coins that would spill to coins that will fall into a neat container. And that was by design. When the coins spilled out, there was a pause in the gameplay. They'd have to come and they'd give you your money, and it disrupted things. And it often felt like a natural endpoint, so people would call it done and go home. But if they fall right in a container, it's easy to just keep feeding. And now they've gone to where it's all just digital. So you get a big payout, you just keep playing. And to people who don't have a gambling problem, this sounds like insanity. but from talking to people who are this way, Crawford was saying, it's a kind of what we call this sort of, what he calls cognitive extension. They start to feel that the machine is just an extension of their body, right? They're making these noises. They're, I don't know, accumulating dollars, losing dollars, accumulating dollars, playing this game. And so he's wondering, well, let me just read this. Perhaps such pursuits, gambling, right? Video games. And I was thinking like Guitar Hero rather than playing a guitar. Things, well, he says, perhaps such pursuits help us manage the anxiety and depression that come when experiences of genuine agency are scarce, and at the same time we live under a cultural imperative of being autonomous. So these pursuits, where there are no impediments between your will and its realization. And I love that line. Like, there's the thing you want to do, and you can't just make it happen in the world. We are not, I mean, how many times have I wished I had a Harry Potter spell? Just clean the kitchen and cook my dinner, please, right? There are these impediments to what you want and then what actually happens in the world. And when technology comes in and sort of closes the gap of those impediments, I think it can give us a sort of sense of autonomy that's just not legitimate. I don't know, I'm gonna let you take over now because I'm rambling. Jump in.
Yeah, well, there's stuff I could say.
Yep.
If there are any questions or
should
comments or
ask questions.
pushback, there's been fewer comments today, which is
That's
fine.
true.
We could keep blabbing. We
Casey's
could.
got a question. Yeah.
We're experts.
I've got a comment and then a question.
Okay.
The comment is, first of all, there's been talk about, there's that case that the pro-technology will make, it's inevitable, go with it. What I feel like people don't realize is that there's always somebody behind the technology or who controls the technology.
Yeah.
For instance, I don't know if you heard about this, but I guess in 2027, there's been proposed technology that will monitor people driving, and this technology will determine itself if you are suitable to be driving, and if you're not, it will stop your car and like pull you over. So yes, like you can see how people might make a case for this, safer driving, but ultimately someone's going to control that.
Right.
What if somebody more sinister, or it can be, these things can all be ultimately be used against us. So that was just the comment that I was just going to make, that people don't really. That's kind of taking it to the next step that a lot of people don't really do.
For sure.
The question was, I guess, what do we do? I mean, we are, I want to resist, a lot of this technology. I want to resist it for my family, for myself. But what are some practical things that, have you guys thought about that? Or, I think
Yeah,
education is a clear one, and I'm excited, and I agree. I think that is an area where there's optimism, but there's still just in our everyday life the use of it and reliance on it and addiction to it that is just, it's so hard to resist. And so how do we do that? And what are some of your thoughts on that? And what can we do together maybe?
Could I ask
absolutely.
a clarification question? Like, which areas do you, what particular developments are you most concerned about? Because I think the what we do question varies a ton depending on which facet of the technology we're looking at, right? So whether you're worried about surveillance or whether you're worried about pornography addictions, like those are very different.
I think, yeah,
You know.
I'm worried about all of that.
Oh,
Yeah.
Definitely. But I think the main thing I'm worried about is the deterioration of our character and our humanness. And so it's the everyday use that we have of it. Like kind of what we were talking about before, is the poem, don't call your friend,
Right.
call the chatbot. What do we do? Do we set a rule? Do we just never use it? Or do we have our kids never use it? Do we start communities of people who resist it together, and
I think communities are a big part. I will say, I feel like I should let you jump in,
No,
but I'm
please,
going
go
to. This is, so anybody who knows me knows this is something that I struggle with all the time. I do little things. I get very annoyed at the idea of buying more tech to help my tech problem, but I do that sometimes. So I have a typewriter that has an e-ink screen. I don't use it often, but I love it for first drafts of stuff, and I have a Kindle instead of an iPad. And a brick to lock down my phone for a while. For me, it's a struggle. Maybe it's having ADD, maybe it's just my impulsivity in general, but it is hard. But I think Christians have an advantage here if we just think about it, because there are certain things you would never ever use a replacement for. If you were training for a marathon, you would never take an Uber for your route. You just wouldn't, because you are well aware. What I want is to get better at running, not to get to the end of my route. You would literally never consider using tech to replace that step because you know what you want there, right? Nobody's gonna go to the gym, unless you're going to the gym just to impress somebody. If you're actually going to the gym to get strong, you're not gonna use some sneaky fake weights or a weight assistance device or anything like that, because you know what you want and you know that would undermine it. So I wanna read, it was kind of the perfect setup for this. The last quotation on the second page, second to last paragraph, it's just the very beginning of a longer Onion art. Y'all know the Onion, the satirical newspaper? We're the first people to be very funny after September 11th, and I'm eternally grateful for that. So I don't have the rest of the article, but while cracking open his second beer as he chatted with friends over a relaxed outdoor meal, local man Marshall Platt, 34, was reportedly seconds away from letting go and enjoying himself when he was suddenly crushed by the full weight of work emails still needed to be dealt with, right? And the rest of the article is all about how he's faking it, chatting with his friends, and inwardly wow, man, I really almost just was relaxing, right? And Crawford goes on, and he says, the sketch seems to be about the little tasks that claim his attention, but at the center of it is an ethical void. And he uses the word ethical here the way that Michael and I do, not just for there's a right choice and a wrong choice, but you're a certain kind of thing, and there's a good life for that kind of thing. There's a way to be flourishing. There's a life of excellence and a life of withering, right? So at the center is an ethical void. He is unable to actively affirm as important the pleasure of being with friends. He therefore has no basis on which to resist the colonization of life by hassle. But we do have a basis. You wouldn't take the Uber to get to the finish line because you know what you want there. Christians at least have some shared, agreed upon sense of what we are and what we're supposed to be becoming, right? I think Crawford is right that a lot of people genuinely don't. My students don't. What is a good life? What is a person? They don't. Our culture does not share answers to those questions anymore, and that trickles down. But Christians do. So, I mean, that's such a philosopher answer. But I do think always asking yourself, right? Like, what is this tech? Like, is this helping me in the process of sanctification and growing in community with the body of Christ? Or is it pulling me from those things?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to say general things because I think it's so specific to individuals and families, and there's different strategies. And here too, maybe trying lots of strategies is the right thing. You know, all the way from the most extreme of forming your own kind of community to just sort of more moderate strategies. The only two things that come to my mind, and they're not particularly, so I actually don't struggle with addiction to this thing. I'm just like one of these really weird people that it does nothing for me. Not nothing. Again, the politics is where I get sucked into it a little bit, but it's not hard.
Raise your hand if you've ever texted Michael. You all know his relationship with his phone. It's very distant.
It's often not around. So that makes me, I have a harder time giving like advice about myself. The only thing I would say is like for kids and for families, I think you can never expect your kids long term to be better than the example you set for them, right? So as much as what are the rules for them, it's like what am I modeling for them? And then the other thing I would say, and this is a bigger issue, but I think this like losing community and touch with people is a much deeper trend in our society. You could take away all the technology, we'd still be a relatively lonely, isolated culture, right? I mean, marriage rates are quite low, and the number of people know is low. I think briefly in my class a year ago, I mentioned the book Bowling Alone, which was by the Harvard sociologist Robert Putnam, I think is the guy's name. Anyways, just looking at the decline of like joining clubs, going to church, like civic engagement, right? And he said there's been a dramatic decline in our culture since the 50s or 60s. And when I think about this like loneliness and isolation, the thing that always comes most to mind is a friend of ours in Germany who is from Kenya. Now, Germany is probably even a little more like our culture. They like their space, they like their quiet, very few children, and they have a lot of space, right? So and I think where this is all going is like space and the ability to be alone and be isolated. People tend to go towards that, even if it's not what's good for them. Anyway, so we had this friend from Kenya, and she said in Kenya, I am never, ever alone. And I am never in a room where people can't just walk into that room and don't regularly walk into that room. And she would go back, she lived in Germany for a number of years, and she'd go back to Kenya with her family, and she would feel like a very introverted person who's like, I need my space, like back away people. But then she would come to Germany, and it just seemed so sort of lonely and subdued and lacking in personal relationships. And I think that when people get affluence, I think that C.S. Lewis's image of hell in The Great Divorce is basically like, you can have everything, it's just not quite real, and people create friction, and so people keep moving further and further apart. You imagine hell is this infinite space where you can always move further from the center, and people are messy and they're annoying, and so we move apart from them. And I think what we see with affluent cultures, the more affluent a culture gets, the more people isolate and pull off on their own, and they're just not forced up against each other. And so like, just as a very concrete thing, like I think have a small house. I mean, you already have a house. I don't know what size it is, right? But like, we have a relatively small house. Our kids shared rooms for a while. Now they don't, but it's still one story. And I like the fact that we have to live on top of each other, right? Because I think that's both in terms of like, you know what people are doing. It just forces you to come up for air from whatever you're fixated upon. So I don't know. I mean, that's just two little things.
I would actually agree with that. Like I have loved, I don't feel like our house is tiny. I mean,
by world standards, it's plenty big.
But compared to Maritza's house, it's like a palace. They live in a tiny little house. But she would say the same thing. It's for Tampa standards, we live in a small house. But I do genuinely prefer that, and that's why I think I actually disagree with you a little bit that it's not related to technology, this decline. It's not related to AI and the internet, maybe, but I really do think the more you can just procure for yourself, the less you need other people, the less you will be around other people, right? So things like just the technology of how easy manufacturing is and how easy it is. I mean, you hear some stories, like younger generations, between Amazon, Uber Eats, and grocery delivery, they don't have to leave their house for anything. They work from home, right? So you can work from home and have your food delivered and your groceries delivered and your items delivered. And that's an extreme version. But way before that is like, I mean, I go to YouTube for things that all right, some of the things that we go to YouTube for, I would have just never tried to fix in the past. But I could, like, ask my dad, right? So I do think technology, broad technology, there he is, right?
Yeah.
I'm just at a conference where one of our partners is Mennonite Disaster Services. So I've learned a lot about Mennonites and Amish, right? And so we build houses after disasters. That's what our organization does. The partners you want to build houses are the Mennonites and the Amish, because they're the best at it. So we're there, and they were talking about the different regulations that they have, right? I learned about shiny bumper and black bumper Mennonites. If you don't know this, the old order Mennonites, you're only allowed to have black bumpers and not shiny bumpers, right? Because shiny bumpers draw attention to yourself, and you shouldn't draw attention to yourself, right? Well, anyway, we got this conversation, and one of them said that one of their leaders is a genius, quite literally, and he has a didactic memory. He will use laptops, he will not connect online, and he will make a phone call, but he absolutely would not have a video call, right? So I'm discussing this with my son, and I'm telling him, about all this stuff. And he said, Dad, and he loves the Anabaptists, my son.
Yeah.
So he says, you know why they do that, Dad? And I said, tell me what you think. He says, they have two filters. Does this build community? And does it draw attention to either self or the group in a bad way?
Yeah.
And when he said that, I thought, wow, sounds like Jesus, huh?
Yeah, those are good
If you've
filters.
ever met the Mennonites or met the Amish, A, they have great ties, right? And great rocking chairs and stuff like that. But the other thing is they just kind of being Jesus, I've met some of these people, it's just like, you just visibly see Jesus, and it's kind of amazing. And so I've been thinking about that ever since I got back from this conference. Everything is permissible for me, but not everything is beneficial.
Right. Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that. I've been thinking a lot this year for some reason about how relatively short the time in history is. Really so short. When people routinely were very aware of what they looked like at that moment. Like we have mirrors everywhere and selfies and cameras everywhere. And if you just think like before cameras were everywhere, I mean, mirrors have been around for a while, right? But this idea and that's another case where the technology inevitably gets in there, right? You are forced to see what you look like all the time, and that turns your attention back to what you look like. So a video call, of course, you get on a video call, and nobody's ever, maybe are people out there who are like, oh, I look great on Zoom, right? But I think and then your attention is drawn from what the point of the meeting was to the fact that you don't look great on Zoom right now.
Yeah, I mean, I am deeply intrigued by the more radical Mennonite, Amish type solutions. I think part of my hesitation is it's so against our cultural DNA that I know is very deep in me because what you could say is like we as individuals just don't have the willpower unless we collectively come up with standards and sort of enforce them at the group level. Mm-hmm. But that's also very foreign to how we function as a culture, most of us, if we didn't grow up like the Mennonites. So part of me wonders, like, can you just recreate that without 99 times out of 100 creating disasters? If we in this room were like, hey, let's go live like Mennonites, and we'll make these I don't know, we'd probably fail, but it does have appeal, and I think to just throw out an idea that I got from Mike Staccasis, he mentioned it, I thought about it before as well, but I think it's a good image of a lot of what technology does, and why I could go so far as to be like, yeah, no electric lights. The idea is Scripture day by day pours forth speech, night by night reveals knowledge. The idea of the heavens, of the stars in particular, as a unique expression of the glory of God. And then you think of light pollution. I mean, and you can take this at a literal level, but you can also say this is emblematic of a culture that we have these little lesser lights, and we are dependent upon them, and they drown out these much more glorious lights, right? And so, I mean, to me, I think that actually you do lose something. Like when you have an electric light, anyone can take any hours they want. There's not this collective rhythm of like, hey, it's dark now. We're all going to have to be, one of the things when we lived in Germany, they still had relatively rigorous hours about when stores could be open and closed. He goes, it's different now. I think they've finally gotten rid of that. But Sabbath laws, they had very strict Sabbath laws.
Almost nothing was ever open on a Sunday.
Mostly because the working class parties over there were really into it, as were the Christians. So they kind of made a coalition, and they had good Sabbatarian laws. But also they would, like nothing would open before a certain time, and by like 9 at night, everything is closed. And what you see is that it forces everyone onto the same schedule and rhythm. It's not like, well, you're working these hours, you're working these hours, and it brings you together. Certainly the electric light, for all the good it's brought us, has allowed us to, just give us one more little bit of freedom to break apart and each do our own thing in our own rhythm, in our own way. So
that actually reminded me of another response to Casey's question, which is like, what should we do? I think it's really easy to just think in terms of like limiting. I'll limit this, and I won't do this, and but I think we're probably more likely to be successful if we do a better job of like replacing, of actively doing. So getting outside, I mean, the phone can seem super entertaining unless you like go for a walk, and it pales in comparison to just beautiful nature, I think, right? Or do like something that just breaks the illusion, I think, that the whole world is in this little screen in front of you, right? Or what I will try to do for myself, because I do struggle with this stuff, right? If I realize, I'm just scrolling again, I will like just go pick up the mandolin, which I'm terrible at, but I love it because I'm terrible at it. I've played the guitar for a really long time. But the mandolin is new and hard, right? So just trying to do things where I'm doing them. When Crawford was talking about gambling and video games, he used this term cognitive extension and this expression of getting in the zone, right? Everybody wants to get in the zone where the machine you're playing with feels like an extension of your body. But I read that and I thought, man, that's definitely how I used to talk about my guitar. And that was kind of a good thing, right? And I think probably a painter would feel that way about a brush sometimes, right? A musician and their instrument. And so I was trying to figure out what the difference is, why I think it's kind of a good thing sometimes and not a good thing other times. And then he went on to say he feels that way about his motorcycle. And I think at least one of the differences is whether, like, how much you're actually doing. So I think one answer is, like, try to be doing things where you're not just watching or scrolling or even reading, like you're doing things in the world that actually puts up resistance, right? So go try to find a certain bird, because they'll hide from you, they'll resist. You will meet resistance, right? You could Google it and see a picture of the bird. It would take 2 seconds, right? But go try to find it, or it doesn't have to be a bird.
Do you think if we took technology away and you kind of went back to like the innate things that God like made us, that you would have had to have done without technology, like, do you think, I don't know, do you think it'd like come out? Because like, I don't know, I think of our teenage boys, and like, these boys like to game. It is actually one way they get connected. They all live in different cities, and so it is kind of fun that they get to connect electronically.
Yep.
But they also meet in person, and I had the privilege of taking the group camping recently, and just to watch them do their thing.
Mm-hmm.
And 1 minute, they're chatting and doing things, and then next minute they're off to the woods, and their shirts are off, and they got trees on their back. And what are you doing? We're building a tree house.
Yeah.
And so they're like, when can we back and continue it? So like, I've seen that in my younger son. Like, there's this thing to do. Like he's definitely in the technological world, and probably will be with his future career and things. So I don't know. If we took it away, do you think like all that would come back out? Like I'm just thinking out loud.
What do you mean by took it away? Do you mean that, like, for a weekend camping, or?
If you didn't have electricity, and if you had to go, build your house and grow your food, I think let's go back like a little house on the prairie, like, could we get it, like, would it come back out, you know, like, it almost seems like we talk about this generation, like, they don't have a lot of that, like, unless, obviously, you're parenting and you're kind of exposing that, but, like, I don't know, like, I like God, I just feel like my kids, I can see some of that, like, they grow up, like, God put it in them, right? There's things that, like, I have boys, so it's all boys, but, like, they're meant to do those things, right? Like, in different things with different people, but, like, I don't know, like, I think it would.
I mean, I think if I had to suddenly support our family from a farm, we would probably starve. But I do think in general, lots of people getting outside and just giving kids unstructured play, it does awaken some of that stuff. What did you want to add on, David, since you're one of the kids we're talking about?
I would say I think that in the same, like, it's kind of simple, but I think it takes time. Like, the more time you spend conditioned to the technology, the more it affects you, like, linearly over time. And I think the same way, the more time you spend outside, the more that affects you. So when I was a little kid, I spent every single day, either after school or in the summer, at my buddy's house in the neighborhood, every night at his house, and we played video. I think we got 45 minutes to an hour to doing it each day. We'd always beg his mom to play more, because it's Florida, it's hot outside. She'd generally say no, and we'd go out and play soccer. And I remember being sad then, and like, it's hot out here, why do I play soccer? I want to play Fortnite. And thinking back now, I'm so happy we didn't spend every day playing Fortnite, because I don't remember a single thing of that. I remember a ton of time playing soccer, and that came with time. And I think because of that rigidness that she imposed on us, I don't think back now regretting that time we spent all day playing Fortnite. I think I can think back enjoying the time we spent outside. And I think kind of, as a parent, like, hopefully your kids will thank you for being strict with them. Thank them. I would not. 10 years ago, that screen time is a big argument. But I think the more you're conditioned to it, the more it becomes natural, and the more it is easier to adapt, I guess.
And I also think asking good questions, like, you're right, those boys, so Bree's son and David and a group, this tight group of boys, they play video games together many nights a week, and we hear David down the hall hooting and hollering. But man, I would rather he do that than lots of things, because they're talking to they're literally talking to each other, right? So I really don't think, like, well, technology's always bad, right? If it were a beautiful day and we gave them the opportunity to go to the springs or go camping and they picked gaming, I would be really unhappy. And also we would just say no, right? But like when it's nighttime and they don't live near each other, these boys would be playing Manhunt in the street if they lived in the same neighborhood. And so they're running around in a virtual world. And I don't think just because it's tech, it's always a bad thing. Yes, Susanna. Oh, sorry.
I think that when it comes to that, it's not a matter of technology or no technology. I think it's a matter of, are we putting our kids in situations where they're developing their character, where they're forming things like perseverance? That's a huge thing that technology is taking away from them. So we have to just be careful about, what things are stripping that away, because that is a huge part of their development and a huge part of all of our development as Christians.
Yeah. That's great. I think you're right. Perseverance is a big thing. I see both of you, but I saw Lou first. We'll say 1, 2, 3.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
I was just going to say, on the positive side with technology, the reason why we have time to play soccer, play an instrument, do art, is because we're not out
farming.
on the
Yeah,
farm,
it's true.
like trying to survive.
Yep.
So,
Yes.
so it is like, how are we taking that gift
Right.
that technology can give us to the point that was just made, to develop ourselves in the full potential that God has given into each one of us, from having lived overseas and seeing people who are just in survival mode. You just almost weep at times because they are not going to have that pleasure of being able to experience that creativity, that all God has given into all of us.
Right.
And so we're blessed.
Absolutely. I agree with that. I do.
Well, Casey used the word addiction in whatever you were
Yeah.
saying, and I kind of bristled a little bit. Addiction. Well, I'm not addicted.
I am, yeah.
Because to me, I'm like, oh, that's just like such a negative thing. But I think it is a good, you know what you were saying when you think about it? I think that's a good thing to think about. Could I really live without it? Like the cheers between Michael and Dolores.
Right.
Michael's like, okay with not using his phone or being tied to it. You like it more. I think about myself like, okay, well, I can go for a little bit of time without my phone. But then recently I was with my 7-year-old grandson. Loves his technology.
Yeah.
And he says to me, Mimi, I have to play my game. And I felt this pull. He was like, I can't live without it. And that was a little scary. To witness that.
Well, it's
There
the,
was such a tug.
yeah.
And I think these are all good questions for us to ask ourselves. And looking at the next generation, could they live without it? Because honestly, I have to force my grandchildren when they're with me. Okay, we're having a little bit of non-electronic time.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they will talk to you.
Well, the people designing these apps, it's not a secret. They use addiction science in designing these apps. They have built them on the backs of what we have learned about how people get addicted to things. It's not, I think that's in this one, right? Is that where I read that? Yeah. So it's not, and there's lots of studies that people will get things like they'll start sweating or have elevated heart rate if they realize they left their phone somewhere. So I don't actually think addiction, I don't think it's too strong of a word, at least for some of us. Yeah. And I saw more hands. Yeah,
Sure.
Jeremy.
Well, I guess I was kind of thinking of seeing the next generation, and I was born at the time at the cusp of before we really got into technology, and we're still kind of doing things. I was born in the 90s, so
Yeah.
I have that middle period of not having to do a lot of that, and the days was how you have the option of playing video games, which is different in my time when it first became a thing of getting online and playing with a bunch of people.
Yeah.
But I'm also an only child, so I didn't really have friends around the neighborhood.
Oh,
either.
yeah.
So my mom preferred me to be inside playing games because I'm safe.
Okay.
So, it's kind of one of those things. But seeing how different technology is, compared to the early 2000s to now, the thing that I guess, still a young parent, just seeing how that's changing kids a lot, and I'm thinking of my 2 boys, I'm just thinking what is probably the best way of trying to come to grips of monitoring monitoring their use of AI, or even how they're going to use it in schooling, because it is this next great advancement of how we do research, how we're going to do education, how we're going to do everything. I remember when the internet became a big thing, and it kind of pushed resources from the library to the internet, and now we're going from internet to just using AI, and potentially can speed things up when it comes to learning, but also can be a major hindrance when you have the wrong information a lot. And then then we get into the interesting conversation of I don't think that's true, even though AI told you that. They also feed you nonsense too. It's kind of like when people say, well, Google said this. Yeah, it doesn't make it true. So I'm just wondering, what is there anything you can do about that? Or is it just going to be I think, as you say, AI feeding AI, so it's just garbage in, garbage out? Is there, I don't know, what do you guys think?
Just 2 thoughts about the education point. One, I would be shocked if it ever turned out that AI was a benefit to anyone under 20 in learning things.
Yeah.
It might be that there comes a time when you're ready to use it, and you're gonna need it for your job. But I would imagine, I would be shocked if it turned out that no, there's actually, as 12-year-olds, you're getting a lot of educational value out of this AI. Could be wrong. That would be as an educator, my hunch. And then another thing about what you can do is, I do think you have a moderate amount of freedom as a parent in where you kids are in school. There's just different public schools or magnet schools or homeschool. Talking to Marisa Hess last week, I wanted to get in the conversation we had with her because she is so optimistic about the future of education, and she's optimistic because she sees that any disruption brings new opportunities. And even if for most people it's a bad thing, which she agreed on, I think the person who's just stuck in a system and going through without much attention on the part of their parents, and the old traditional model with now all this new stuff added on, like they're going to be in trouble. But I think as people see that, there's going to be all these new opportunities and new ways of doing things that create opportunities for people like her, people like us. So I guess, I mean, the one thing I would say on a more positive note is when you see disruption, and even if it's disruption that's going to bring net negative, that doesn't mean it won't open up these new pockets of opportunity that we're called to look for and to seize.
Yeah.
So as a parent, I think you can do that. As educators, we try to do that, to say if the old model is failing, where does that create space for new models that, and interest in new models.
I would also say your little guys, who we love so much, are tiny right now. Like, now is the time to be really strict about screen time limits. You've got solid 15 years of them fighting you over screen time, right? If you start too generously, you're doomed, right? Like, it's very hard to take back what's been given. So if they get used to 2 hours a day on an iPad, like it's hard to move that. It's harder to scale back than to give a little more. So just practically speaking, I think the less you can have them on, because it's at any given moment it's easy to let them do it, right? But then in the long run, as their expectations shift, it's harder, because then they have habits that we can't really fix.
We should probably let
Yeah, we should let everybody go. Sorry.
All right, well, thank you, everyone.
Yep.